A slew of bombshell lawsuits could soon reveal some A-list celebrity names connected to the infamous P. Diddy freak-offs. But before these suits are filed, some celebs are rushing to settle, all to keep their names private and out of the Diddy conversation. And with literally thousands of accusations against Diddy and more than 100 civil suits coming down the pipeline, how will these alleged offenders be able to keep up? And if these startling accusations are true, could they face charges? We'll break it all down with former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. Now, it's been a busy month for 54-year-old Sean P. Diddy Combs, who spent the whole of October behind bars on federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. This comes after more than a dozen civil suits were filed against Diddy, alleging he was a kingpin in a sex trafficking scheme that lasted decades. The civil suits and federal indictment all lay out a similar pattern. Diddy or his associates drugging victims, often sexually assaulting them, forcing them to have sex with prostitutes, and filming all of this. These scenarios were dubbed freak-offs by Diddy, and that term was listed in multiple civil suits and in the indictment. The feds say they have recordings of this too, and that's what led up to Diddy's arrest. So we know for sure Diddy is somehow featured in these recordings, but there are also rumblings that other high-profile names were caught on camera too. We got this info from Houston-based attorney Tony Buzby. He's the lawyer behind more than 100 civil claims against Diddy that are expected to be filed over the coming weeks. This week alone, 7 civil suits were filed listing Diddy as the defendant. The allegations range from 1995 to 2021, with multiple accusations of rape, one of a minor. And according to Buzby, more lawsuits are on the way, with some major celebrity names also attached. I talked to Buzby just one day after he announced the suits and asked him about these celebrities. A lot of people are talking about names that could come up in these lawsuits. You referenced that some of these names are pretty high profile and could shock us. What can you tell me about those names? Are there a lot of people that could be implicated in future crimes? Is it possible that the things that will be listed in these future lawsuits could be prosecuted? What can you tell me?
Well, I'm very careful to talk about whether someone did or did not commit a crime. You know, the civil system is very different than the criminal system. The criminal authorities are very particular about which claims that they pursue because the standard of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. In the civil system, the standard of proof is more likely than not, or preponderance of the evidence. So it's a lot lower standard in the civil system. So, but to answer your question, as far as crimes, I won't comment on that. But as far as whether there will be additional individuals, people that we all know joined in some of these suits, there's no doubt that will be the case. There's no doubt that some of these events and these assaults occurred at particular people's homes, some venues, some hotels, some clubs. We know that there were people in the room when some of these things occurred. It's my view that if you participated in it, if you benefited from it, if you encouraged it, if you watched it go on and were somehow involved, whether it be even peripherally involved, and did not try to stop it, especially with regard to minors, then it's my view that you have liability on the civil side. So that's what we're looking at. And obviously, we want to be very careful about who we name because I don't want an error in that respect is not good for anyone. And I'm not going to be the person that starts naming names of potential people and smearing people for no reason because the case is about credibility. So I have made sure that each of these people that we represent currently are people that I'm proud to represent and I believe in, and I believe in their case. But I want to make sure that we include every potential liable party when we file the case.
These names that will be included, the ones that you are willing to include in these suits, why will they surprise us so much? Is it because they're beloved people in the Hollywood universe?
I've gotten this question so many times, and I know, and you're doing your job. Obviously, you want to know who they are, some kind of facts, so you can kind of figure out who they are. I think I'll just leave it at this. I mean, you know, it was a secret that everyone knew about what was going on with regard to these parties and some of the things that happened in these so-called after parties. There was a pattern in practice, custom of behavior that went on for many, many years. The MO of how it went down was pretty much the same for many, many years. It typically included, people identified and specifically invited to certain venues and parties. And when they showed up, they were given a specific drink. They were made to drink it. If they didn't drink it, they would many times be kicked out of the party. And a lot of these folks would drink this drink that was provided to them and literally could not remember hardly anything that happened thereafter. And the next morning woke up disheveled, injured, confused, scared, ashamed, full of guilt, and wondering what in heck happened to them. Some of them, of course, have clear memory about what happened, but could not stop it from happening. It's incredibly egregious, especially with regard to those that were minors at the time this happened. And it's my view that if you were around and you were there and you were watching this and in some way participating in this, you're complicit. It's one thing to obviously anybody that was directly participating in this, in my view, should be under the jail. But that's not my decision to make. That's the authorities. My job is to find and ferret out all the people involved, facilitated, benefited from, profited from, and make sure that they are parties in these cases as we file them. And there is a long list of people. I've said, and I'll say it again. I have no doubt that there are people right now who know that they were somehow involved in this, who are now scrubbing their social media, who are searching their memories, who are deleting their texts, probably deleting pictures, and trying to distance themselves from this. And we know who they are, or we will find out who they are. So, this is not something that's going to happen overnight, but I think we're at the tip of the iceberg here.
Buzby has already sent demand letters to these celebrities, and some have settled outside of court before these lawsuits could even be filed. That means their names may never be public. So, how does all of this work? If there really are incriminating recordings of these celebrities, could they face charges too? Here's where we have to bring in former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. So, our focus today is talking about these major celebrities who apparently were involved in some of these freak offs, P. Diddy's alleged sex trafficking scheme. And now, some of them, there are reports that they're settling outside of court before we know their names. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they're delaying the inevitable. The ones who are settling, they're probably getting non-disclosure agreements, which are fine, but those become blossomed and exposed to the public, if you will, if there's a court order or subpoena, because that information, among the parties will be private, but if there's a court proceeding, they may have to disclose who they are and things like that. But
And
I will say this: if I were a celebrity or public figure that had any contact with Diddy and all these freak outs and all the other uh, explosive events, they should be panicking. And settling is probably the best thing, but it's going to delay the possible inevitable because an aggressive federal prosecutor or group of them is going to try to get a hold of those names and the people who settled.
yeah, I think you and I have actually talked about this in the past because there have been these allegations that some A-list celebrities are involved in all of this. And I mean, they have to go back in their memory bank and think, I was with P. Diddy. I was at this party. Okay, it might be recorded. It might be out there somewhere. So, what do you think these people are doing? Are they, I know we talked about settling, but do you think they're also retaining their own attorneys and kind of bulking up their team in that way?
Oh, the people who may be involved, if they are not getting attorneys, they should have gotten one yesterday or a month ago. And if they don't get an attorney, then they are really in harm's way because they could be subject to possible indictment, possible charges. But at best for them, they could be corroborating witnesses, even if they did not engage in these freakouts or whatever you want to call them. They may have relevant information regarding themselves, what they observed, or they could provide leads to the prosecutors.
I know you talked about the aggressiveness of these federal prosecutors because it's the Southern District in New York. They're the best of the best. And so they're probably going to be referring to these lawsuits, kind of reaching out and seeing who these people are. And you alluded to this that they potentially could be charged. These celebrities whose names we don't yet know, they could be charged. What would all of that look like?
Well, here's the thing. If I were the prosecutors, and I worked in the Eastern District of Virginia, so I consider that the best U.S. Attorney's Office. But the Southern District is a close second. They are brilliant. And there's probably four key prosecutors on this case. I don't know if they're going to add more defendants because you want to keep this indictment clean. It's sort of like the charges against President Trump. He's the sole defendant. If you bring in other people, you have motions to sever, you have conflicts, things like that. So they may be added as unindicted conspirators, but not defendants in the caption. So if I were the prosecutors in the next few months, and this May 2025 date is ridiculous. It's going to be pushed back. They are probably going to continue to do grand jury work on potential additional victims, additional conspirators, and they may be named in the indictment, but not put in the caption as a defendant. So that's what I predict. You're going to see at least one, two, or three superseding, amending indictments in the next few months, in my view.
Do you think it's in the best interest of these celebrities who they themselves know they were involved? They may have even spoken with an attorney in regards to these civil suits that have yet to be filed. So these people who know that they were part of it, do you think it's in their best interest to reach out to federal prosecutors and say, "Hey, I'll tell you everything I know right now and work alongside you"?
The only That's an outstanding question. The only way that's going to happen is if the person in consultation with their attorney have concluded that they were part of a conspiracy and they in fact did things that violated the federal laws. In that case, they may want to reach out to stop the bleeding or delay the inevitable because they're eventually going to get a call from the federal prosecutors. But it depends on how much information their attorneys think inculpates them and puts them in harm's way. But if they don't have any uh, strong legal exposure, if I were their attorney, I'd say lay low, don't reach out, let them come to you. But if there is strong evidence, I would call the prosecutors because it's going to come that they will be added at least as an unindicted conspirator.
And you mentioned your prediction about no defendants being added to this, only P. Diddy, because that makes sense. The feds want to go after him. He's the kingpin in all of this. So potentially not another defendant in these celebrity names that we do not yet know. But do you think it's possible that down the line, this Diddy case is completely over, a verdict has been ruled, all of that, that then the feds could go back again to these people who weren't initially charged and then pursue legal action then?
I do, but I think the more practical thing is they're going to build their case and focus on Diddy. But at the same time, if they have people that should be charged, they're not going to add them as a defendant in this Diddy case, but they may work out charges in a parallel project to get them to cooperate and to be witnesses. And if they testified at the Diddy trial, they would be offered as an unindicted conspirator of Diddy. That may be the way to do it. Going after them after Diddy is concluded, there's less incentive. And here's why. The prosecutors have their trophy, they have Diddy, they can put it on the wall, end it, close it down, and just move on to another case.
Now, we don't know the specifics yet. I know we're all dying to hear the names and how these people were involved and to what degree. But just a basic question about all of this. If they were there, they witnessed a crime, they can see that something is going wrong, a person's being drugged, or there's a minor, there's a rape, whatever it is. Are these people compelled to report that?
No, no. There's a concept called misprision of felony. And if I witness you, Sierra, robbing a bank, and I'm across the street, and I saw you come out of the bank with a gun and the money, I don't have a duty to report that to police. However, if I attempt to conceal what I just observed, that could be considered misprision of felony. But if they just observed a crime and did nothing else, there's no duty for them to report other than their conscience and their moral compass.
And again, we're not sure exactly to what extent these people were involved. It does seem like it was more than just witnessing it, but that remains to be seen. We'll circle back to that when we know more. As far as the allegations against Diddy, though, there are these new civil suits. There were 7 filed this week alone. There's more than 100 that are expected to be filed over the next couple of weeks. And some reports say that thousands of people were sexually assaulted by Diddy and have come forward. So, at the very least, is this daunting to these other people, these celebrities who are involved, if they want to go and settle and get their names out of the lawsuits? I mean, doesn't that seem like a big undertaking?
But the attorney, Tony Buzby, has a daunting task in hurting all these cats, if you will, these lawsuits. So I would not, if I were him, I would not go above 120, 130 lawsuits because at the end of the day, you're facing the law of diminishing returns. The other people that may be victims, they can be used in those cases as leverage. But for Mr. Diddy or for Diddy, I gotta say his legal fees are going to be through the roof, and he's probably going to have one, two, maybe three law firms representing him if he can get that to work out. Because these lawsuits, these other lawsuits besides the indictment, it's going to be like handcuffs on him when it comes to his criminal trial, a total distraction. And here's the worst thing about these civil lawsuits: discovery, depositions, interrogatories, all this information that these lawsuits are going to gather. There's nothing to prevent uh, the attorney for the lawsuits to turn that over to the prosecutors. That would be a benefit to the Southern District of New York on a grand scale.
Also, talking about the allegations that people are pointing out, we can kind of infer that Diddy's team is going to say, hey, this was consensual. It may be weird or unconventional, but it was consensual sex. We can just assume that they're going to be doing that. But what if these victim survivors were minors? I mean, that completely changes things, both in terms of Diddy and these celebrities who may have been involved in all of that. Does that make things more severe?
Absolutely. Because if your victims, if you will, are 18 or over and they're not under statutory age, Mr. Combs, also known as Diddy, can make the argument, you know what? I was a weird guy. I had perversions, and you may not like it, but this was all consensual. It's on video. I embrace it, but it was consensual. I never forced people to do this. They were all in. But if you have, Sierra, victims who are underage, 12, 13, 14, there's no defense. And you can't argue consent. That's why they have laws that set a minimum for consent.
That's what's shocking to me about all of this. If we're talking about the federal indictment against Diddy, is that he's not charged with anything about sexual assault of a minor. I mean, he faces 3 severe charges, but nothing about kids. I mean, I'm really surprised that the prosecutors didn't bring that. Do you think that they may in the future?
Yes, that's why these civil lawsuits, Sierra, are so vital. Those lawsuits may gather information that there are victims underage. And if that's the case, and the prosecutors get a hold of that, then you really will have a quick superseding indictment. And if they get underage victims, alleged, and once again, he's presumed innocent, if they have alleged victims, that really raises the stakes for Mr. Combs.
So we've talked about it kind of as a through line of this entire interview that the prosecutors are paying attention to these civil suits and potentially talking to the plaintiffs, the attorneys involved, kind of investigating. So you, as a former federal prosecutor, what would all of that look like that they're going through and doing this investigation while they're also at the same time pursuing Diddy? I mean, how does all of that work?
Well, I had a crooked pain doctor. He was egregious. And while my indictment was pending and we were preparing for trial, at the same time, there was a civil suit against one of the pain doctors, by one of the pain doctor's patients who died of an overdose. So that civil suit was conducting discovery and actually conducted a deposition of my defendant. and my defendant did a deposition. I used that deposition in my legal criminal proceeding against the defendant. So that's how it can help the prosecutors. The civil attorneys are doing the digging, they're interviewing witnesses, and at some point in time, if they get good information, they're going to call the prosecutors if the prosecutors don't reach out to them.
The bottom line of the story we're focusing on today is about these celebrities because everyone wants to know the crimes that Diddy is accused of are shocking. The fact that he's this high profile name, but now that there may be other A-listers, obviously everyone's really interested, to say the least, to find out what may happen to them. Now, we know that some of them have settled ahead of time in an effort to keep their name out of the news, but as you've pointed out, it's possible that we would still learn their names. What do you think the likelihood is? Will we have a big reveal of all these celeb names?
I don't think you're going to have a big reveal, but you're going to have water torture in a sense that a name will come out today, maybe 3 days from now. And here's what I predict: even if you have NDAs, you're gonna find out who signed those NDAs, and it's not going to be a secret, even though there's an NDA. So we're going to hear names in the next few weeks. I guarantee it, of potential individuals who have been sued or for whom there's an NDA. I predict that these freak offs, these events that Mr. Diddy had with other people, that we are just getting the tip of the iceberg. I think you're going to see more videos come out, more recordings, more photos. So I think it's only going to get worse. He didn't just wake up last year and have these events. He's been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. He just has this part of his life, part of his culture, where he has a strange habit, if you will, and hobby of doing these events. And you're going to see more and more information come out. It's not going to stop.
Diddy has pleaded not guilty to all the charges against him, and after his arrest, his attorney Mark Agnifilo released a statement reading in part, quote, "Sean Diddy Combs is a music icon, self-made entrepreneur, loving family man, and proven philanthropist who spent the last 30 years building an empire, adoring his children, and working to uplift the Black community. He is an imperfect person, but is not criminal." To his credit, Mr. Combs has been nothing but cooperative with this investigation. Please reserve your judgment until you have all the facts. These are the acts of an innocent man with nothing to hide, and he looks forward to clearing his name in court. Right now, Diddy's federal trial is scheduled for May of 2025, but ahead of that, he's due back in court on December 18th. For Law&Crime, I'm Sierra Gillespie.